Somewhere right now, a parent is telling their child not to worry. The house will be yours one day. The savings will be yours one day. Everything we built will be yours one day, and they mean it. Completely, sincerely, with every intention of following through. But between that conversation and the day it was supposed to happen, there is a gap. And inside that gap lives a system that is older, faster, and more expensive than any of them planned for. The Great Wealth Transfer was supposed to be the largest movement of money between generations in human history, $84 trillion. That's the number the headlines used. Here is what the headlines didn't show you. The math of what happens to Fiden. 84 trillion before it reaches you. The number is real. $84 trillion in boomer wealth. The largest generational accumulation of assets in the history of the United States. Houses bought in 1978 for $290. 64,000, now worth $480. Zero. Pension funds, retirement accounts, life, insurance, policies, investment portfolios. Built over 40 years of a stock market that returned 10% annually on average. The promise felt solid because the assets were solid. You could see the house. You could visit it at Thanksgiving. You knew roughly what it was worth because Zillow told you without being asked. You did the math at some point, minus probably on your phone, probably late at night, minus, and the number felt like a floor under your future. A safety net with a specific address. But the promise was made in a moment. The math runs over decades, and the decades between the promise and the transfer contain a set of systems that nobody explained at the Thanksgiving table. Long-term care costs, estate taxes, probate fees, the spend-down requirements of Medicaid, the medical debt that accumulates in the final years, the cost of a decade of retirement that runs longer than anyone planned, because people are living longer than any previous generation in history. The promise was sincere. The math was not consulted. And the math doesn't care about sincerity. Let's run the actual numbers. The median boomer household net worth, approximately $290, zero. Not $84 trillion, divided by every boomer, minus, that's the aggregate. The median. The household in the middle of the distribution, $290, zero, split between two children, $145, zero each. Before anything touches it, now the system touches it. First, longevity. The average American who reaches 65 will live to 84. 19 years of retirement. 19 years of withdrawing from the Bay. Accounts instead of adding to them, at a standard 4% withdrawal rate on $290, zero, $11, $600 a year. Social Security adds approximately $20, zero a year for the average recipient. Total retirement income, $31, $600 a year. Cost of living for a retired couple, conservatively $45, zero to $55, zero a year. The gap, $13, zero to $23, zero a year. That gap comes from somewhere. It comes from the $290, zero, over 19 years, drawing down $18, zero a year on average, $342, zero. The math, just spent the inheritance. Before anyone died, second, healthcare. Fidelity estimates the average retired couple will spend $315, zero on healthcare costs, not covered by Medicare over the course of retirement. That number assumes no long-term care. Third, long-term care. The average cost of a private room in a nursing facility, $108, zero per year. The average length of a nursing home stay, 2.5 years. Total, $270, zero. This is not covered by Medicare. Medicaid covers it, minus but only after the patient has spent down their assets. To approximately $2, 0 inches most states, the house, the savings, the investment account. All of it must be spent minus or legally transferred at least 5 years before the care begins. A rule most families discover after the 5-year window has closed minus before the government steps in. Fourth, probate and legal costs. The average probate process costs 3 to 7% of the estate's value in legal and administrative fees. On a $290, zero estate, $8, $700 to $20, $300. Gone before distribution. The running total. Start, $290, zero. Retirement income gap over 19 years. $47.20. The math has already exceeded the asset base. This is not a worst-case scenario. This is the median. The median inheritance is not Suvende. 145,000. The median inheritance is considerably smaller, or nothing, or debt. But the median doesn't capture the full story, because above the median minus in the households where the assets are real, and doend. Substantial minus the drain operates differently, not smaller, more sophisticated. A house worth 20 Taiwan. Liu Bai. Liu. You've been told it's yours one day. You've mentally factored it into your retirement plan. You've made decisions, minus career decisions, savings decisions, risk decisions, minus based on a floor that felt solid. Here's what the house actually costs before it reaches you. Your parent retires at 67. At 74, they need in-home care, not full nursing home, minus a home health aide, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, $28 an hour in most markets, $2,240 a month, $26,880 a year. They sell investments to cover it. The investment account that was going to be yours at 79 in home care isn't enough. Memory care facility, $72.00 a year. The investments are gone by now. The house gets a reverse mortgage. A reverse mortgage converts home equity into monthly income minus, with interest accruing on the balance. The loan comes due when the owner dies or moves out. At that point, the estate must repay the full loan amount plus compounded interest or sell the house. The house that was worth 600 inches 2019 has a reverse mortgage balance of $280, 0 by 2031. Net equity, $320, 0 minus if the market held. Split 2 ways, $160, 0 each, before probate fees. Before the 6-month wait for the estate to settle. Before the capital gains on the sale if the property appreciated significantly above the stepped-up basis. $160, 0 arriving at 52. After a lifetime of decisions made partly on the assumption of more. This is not a story about bad parents. This is a story about a system that runs on longevity, on medical costs, on legal architecture, minus, and that system was built long before your name was written into any will. The gap between the promise and the math has a specific psychological cost. It changes decisions. The person who believes an inheritance is coming takes a different job offer, accepts lower pay in a city they prefer, takes on the mortgage they can almost afford, starts the business without enough runway because the inheritance will be the safety net if it fails. These are not irrational decisions. They are rational decisions based on incomplete information. The inheritance was priced in, subconsciously, quietly, in the way a floor under you changes how high you're willing to climb. And when the floor turns out to be smaller than the promise, minus or arrives 15 years later than expected, or arrives as a complicated estate with a sibling dispute and a probate process that takes 2 years and costs $40, 0 inches legal fees, minus the decisions that were built on it, don't automatically reverse. You're 54. The inheritance arrived at 52, and it was $80, 0 instead of $250, 0. The job you took at 38 for the lifestyle instead of the salary. The runway you didn't build at 44 because the safety net was supposed to be there. The retirement account that was deprioritized because the house was factored in. None of those decisions were wrong given the information you had. All of them look different now. The wealth transfer happened. It was just smaller than the promise. And smaller than the promise, arriving late to someone who priced in more minus, is its own kind of broke. Here is the number that changes the frame, the fine behind you. 84 trillion that was supposed to transfer minus the number, the headlines used minus, will not transfer equally. The top 10% of boomers hold 67% of boomer wealth. The bottom 50% hold 5%. The wealth transfer is real, but it is not broadly distributed. It is concentrated, generationally and geographically and racially concentrated in a way that makes the sudden thigh forward. 84 trillion headline. Accurate in aggregate and almost meaningless in practice for the median household. If your parents are in the top 10% of boomer wealth, minus if the house is worth $1, $2 million and the investment portfolio is $800. 0 and there is an estate plan and a trust and an attorney who updates it every 3 years, minus the transfer is real. The math still takes some of it, but enough survives that the promise approximates the reality. If your parents are in the median or below, minus if the KID, 290,000 net worth is mostly home equity in a market that may or may not hold. With $60, 0 inches retirement savings and no long-term care insurance, minus the math we just ran, is your math. And most people are in the median or below. This is not pessimism. This is the prerequisite to building something real. Because the person who is waiting for a floor that may not arrive is not building the floor themselves. And the floor yourself, minus built slowly, quietly, without the inheritance as a variable, minus is the only floor that arrives on schedule. There is a different calculation, not instead of the inheritance minus in addition to it. What happens if you remove the inheritance from your financial plan entirely? Not because it won't come, because the decision to remove it forces you to build as if it won't. And building as if it won't, minus starting at 32, instead of waiting until 52, minus changes the math in a direction that makes the inheritance irrelevant whether it arrives or not. By $500 a month, invested at 32, at 7% average annual return by 52, $247, 0, by 62, $567, 0. By 67, $785, 0. That number doesn't require a parent to die. It doesn't require a house to hold its value. It doesn't require an estate to clear probate without a sibling dispute. It requires one decision made consistently for 35 years. The inheritance, if it comes, becomes a bonus. A one-time addition to a foundation that was already built. Instead of a foundation itself, the people who receive the largest inheritances and build the most from them are rarely the ones who waited for it. They are the ones who were already building minus, so that when the money arrived, they had the infrastructure to use it. Money given to someone without financial infrastructure doesn't compound. It fills gaps. The gaps from the job taken for lifestyle, the runway that wasn't built, the retirement account that was deprioritized. Money given to someone with infrastructure, minus with accounts already running, with habits already formed, with a foundation already under them, minus that money compounds. The inheritance doesn't change the outcome. The infrastructure does. Somewhere right now, a parent is telling their child not to worry. The house will be yours one day. The savings will be yours one day. Everything we built will be yours one day. They mean it, and they may be right. But the math between that conversation and that day contains long-term care costs and reverse mortgages and probate fees and 19 years of retirement income, gaps in a system that was built before your name was in any will. The $84 trillion is real, and most of it will arrive somewhere else. The question was never whether your parents loved you enough to leave you something. They do. The question was always whether you were building something that didn't require them to. Because the people who needed the inheritance, least minus the ones who already had the foundation, the accounts, the infrastructure minus, are the ones who benefited from it most. And the people who needed it most minus who had priced it in, built decisions around it, treated it as a floor, minus often found the floor was smaller than the promise, not because of betrayal, because of math. The math was always going to run this way. The only variable was whether you knew it in time to build something that made the math irrelevant. You know it now.